Question about the anime Re:Zero. Is this anime actually worth all the hype? Before we begin, let me ask you guys not to mention any spoilers about things that have not yet happened in the anime. Like most of us, I have a ton of questions, but these are things that I would like to discover from seeing them in the anime, not from reading them somewhere online. With that said, let's go ahead and begin. Let's look at Re:Zero. One late evening in Japan, this kid Subaru is at a 7-Eleven just buying a cup of noodles. Suddenly, he's transported into this mystery fantasy world. Without warning, he finds himself in this medieval time period. The village all around him is full of both humans and demi-humans. There's also some other mythical things like dragons, witches, magic, you name it. The beginning of the series gave me a similar vibe to the recent Gate anime. One of the biggest attractions of the show for me was this thing called the return by death. It turned out to be both a blessing and a curse for our protagonist, Subaru. It was pretty much like a respawn ability that we often see in games. The only downside to this ability was that Subaru wasn't exactly in any control of picking a save point. It was more like Subaru was reaching this checkpoint in this world before his progress was saved. I think even he acknowledged this at some point too. A second key point that kept me very intrigued in this anime was just all the mystery around this world. Story included too. I always like to look back on a show and notice when exactly it got me hooked. You guys know that the first episode of Re:Zero starts with two parts, Part A and B. After seeing the first part, Part A, I was really only a little bit curious, not hooked yet. After Part B, definitely hooked. Is it fair to say that Re:Zero got me hooked after the first episode? One of the things I really enjoyed was just piecing all the clues together that they kept on giving us. We kept on getting thrown so many different mysteries at the beginning. There's so many instances where one or two things may happen. They may just appear to be small things. It's not until later on that the significance of them are fully explained. Looking back at this whole series, I really now wish I had started reviewing this weekly. I recently only started watching this and catching up last week. Another aspect I really enjoyed about Re:Zero is just thinking about what I would have done in a similar situation. It's just something that kept crossing my mind while watching the series. After seeing Subaru try X, Y, and Z, I would just think, what would I do different? Or how would I have done it better? There were so many times where Subaru kept on dying, coming back, dying, and coming back again. At some point, I think you really just have to stop and map the whole situation out. At least that's something I think I would have tried. One of the other things I think I would have tried was just trying to use some of the knowledge that I did know and just try to pass it off as a power. Maybe just try to play it off as a magic ability. For example, since Subaru was actually living through some of these future events, he could have just tried to play it off and say there was some type of future visions that he randomly got. Who knows if everyone would buy it, but I'm sure some people would, especially people like Amelia and Rem. I got a feeling that eventually he might try this out. He could have even just made something up and said that his cell phone was actually the thing giving him the ability. If I ever found myself in a similar situation to Subaru, I think I would have tried to take more advantage of the return by death ability, just to improve myself. They did show Subaru do some sword training with the butler, and he even tried to do some magic training with Puck too. Why not just keep on training and training? At some point, just do it for 4 days straight, then randomly just kill yourself. If you give it enough time, Subaru could have potentially become the most powerful person in this world. I do gotta mention though, just to be absolutely fair, both Subaru and us really had no way of knowing whether this return by death had any type of limit. It even was something that they showed that Subaru was worried about. Even at this point, we still don't know whether a limit actually exists or not. I do have to mention about Re:Zero that at one point the anime did peak. I mentioned before that I really wish I started watching this earlier, just so I could watch it week to week. I know there's some people out there that like marathoning this straight through. I personally just like watching something, then waiting a little bit of time before watching the next episode. I started watching Re:Zero was practically the whole series out. Even after watching just one episode, I had to wait at least, 10, 30 minutes, maybe an hour, just to digest the episode. During that time, I did happen to write some notes here and there about the episodes. Re:Zero for me had me at the edge of my seat at least up to until the first 18 episodes. Up until then, the story was A++ material. After episode 18, it got into more B+ territory. It just seemed like after that, it was really just going through all the motions. It did go up a little bit after episode 22 to 23, but there really wasn't anything too unexpected after that. It even goes to show with some of the stuff I was writing down. Past episode 18 up until the very end, I really had only a few sentences here and there per episode. Before that, it was a few paragraphs. Another thing I really appreciated about Re:Zero was just them delving into the main character's mental health. We see Saburo's mental state keep on going downhill after repeatedly witnessing the people that he cared for dying and dying and dying. Those scenes in particular were honestly really painful to watch. They even go as far as showing Subaru completely breaking down. It was honestly really painful to watch. I just remember thinking, okay, come on, bounce back already, but it never happened. I don't think I've seen another show go as far as this to show a character's mental breakdown. At one point, I was just in disbelief that they actually went an entire episode with him being in complete shock. I know there's some people out there that were complaining about the way he was acting, but honestly, just think about it. How would you have acted if you lived through what he had? Subaru not only kept on constantly seeing the people that he loved die, for a lot of those times, he had a front row seat to them. To his credit, he actually bounced back fairly quickly considering everything that had happened. If I look back at how I would have reacted in the same situation, I'm not sure how it would have affected me if I had experienced the same thing, especially mentally. Before moving on to talking about some of the individual characters, let me lastly mention some of the bloody and death scenes. If we're talking about characters getting cut and seeing their blood, Re:Zero sure has a lot of scenes that are really painful to watch. Most of the time, it's Subaru on the receiving end too. Poor guy doesn't get a break. Especially for some of the scenes where you just see him getting cut, I had to almost look away. This also isn't something that I felt in a while. Even when watching some of the gore scenes in Attack on Titan, it didn't make me feel as bad. I think it had to do something with the combination of the actual scene and us just being so attached to the characters. By far, one of the most difficult things to watch was just Rem getting strangled. That hurt. That just hurt my heart. Now then, the individual characters in Re:Zero. Of course, we have to start off with the main character, Subaru. At least initially, Subaru actually reminded me very much of myself. If you're talking about a guy who's into nerdy stuff and works out every day, that sounds strikingly familiar. I did mention at the beginning, since eventually Subaru started to really annoy me. It started to happen at a point after Sabuto had died a couple of times already. He kept on acting as if some of the previous events were something that everyone else already knew about. Because of this, he kept on just making situations worse and worse for him. It's also something that Subaru kept on doing, and doing a lot. It is totally fair to say that his mental state was suffering a lot from this constant trauma. I would hope that if I was in a similar situation, I would eventually stop and try to think things through. For starters, let's try to think about who knows what and what do I know that they don't. If you need to, just write it out. As we know, this eventually leads Sabuto to a complete breaking point. He finally loses it and says all this shit to Emilia. Honestly, from her perspective, Subaru must have looked like a complete nut job. I'm not even sure how Emilia didn't just drop him completely after that scene. I did hear that both the author and producer tried their hardest to make Subaru look as pathetic as possible. My god, did they do an amazing job at that. Another interesting thing to notice about Subaru is that he never really got any sort of real power-up. Very briefly, we did see Subaru do some magic training with Puck. Didn't last long. He actually found a way to make it effective in battle, but he never spent any time developing it further. We also saw him do some sword training with the butler. After that point, I don't think he ever picked up a sword again. Later on, Subaru also found out that he could use the return by death, or at least invoking the name, to his advantage. For a split second, I did think he was going to try to kill the white whale with that return by death. Didn't happen though. He did use it later versus that green cold dude, but it didn't exactly finish him off. One last interesting thing I'll mention about Subaru is just how he never actually expressed any interest in returning to his own world. It's just one of the things I found odd. Not once in the series did we ever see one thought about him returning. I really don't know if Subaru was just really too stuck up in the moment throughout the series, or maybe he was really just that obsessed with Emilia. Did Subaru really just consider his life too boring before this happened? Or maybe he was just bored in general. It's not exactly like we get a lot about his backstory. We get some hints here and there that he was a gamer who didn't go out too much, although he did work out daily. I did hear that the novels did spend a great deal amount of time fleshing out Saburo before he goes into this fantasy world. It's a complete opposite to what we got in the anime. Maybe one day they'll do an OVA episode 0 where they add more context. Up next is the White Witch Emilia. We meet Emilia right at the beginning, and there's just this whole mystery about this half-elf girl. We later find out that her being a half-elf means that she has some connection to the witch, Satella. It could be some blood relation, or maybe just people are prejudiced for her being half-elf. We never exactly meet any other elves, so we can't really judge them. From what we do find out about Emilia, she's extremely caring for others, almost to a fault. I don't even know if she's self-aware of this. A lot of the time it seems that Emilia is just trying to find some way to justify helping others. It's only later on in the series that we find out that Emilia is very self-conscious, and overall she's just playing hard on herself on how other people see her, due to the fact that she's a half-elf. Emilia unfortunately does appear less and less as the series goes on. There's also the point about Subaru being almost obsessed with her. Is Subaru really justified in his love for Emilia? Like I mentioned, Emilia got less and less screen time as the series went on. Hence, this really only hurt the development of her character. It seems that Saburo eventually was chasing not necessarily Emilia, but this idea of Emilia that he developed in his mind. It honestly circles back to what Emilia told him in episode 15. It was about Saburo having this perfect image of Emilia in his mind. It's eventually what Emilia becomes, less of an actual character and more of an idea and goal. I did happen to hear that now that Emilia is back in the picture, she does get some heavy development in the following arc. Unfortunately for us, at best, that's a few years away. We'll go ahead and judge that Emilia when we get her. Right now, we only got this from the first season. There's just way too many questions and mysteries around Emilia. We know practically nothing about her backstory. Why does she really want to become the ruler? How does she even get chosen as a candidate? In other words, what makes Emilia so special? If we think about it, we have no idea what the twin sisters even think of Emilia, even though they lived together, I'm assuming for years. It's almost at the end of the series that we find out from Beetlejuice that maybe the evil witch wants to use Emilia to be reborn or something like that. Her whole relationship with Satella is still a mystery too. Once again, I would really just love to see Emilia more fleshed out in a future season. Although, I am more interested in a different person. Before we get to her, I think Puck deserves his own section. We meet this kitty early on at the same time that we meet Emilia. He's supposed to be this full spirit in this world. It's possible that in the past he was a lesser spirit for a few centuries or decades. We do see Puck at one point refer to Emilia as his daughter. I don't exactly think he meant this literal. We also see at one point that Puck turns into this beast of destruction as soon as Emilia gets killed. I'm not even sure what that's about. One thing I do know is that they need to release some type of plushies or toys for Puck as soon as possible. They would make a killing. So overall, Puck was just simply adorable. On to the twins, beginning with Rem. It's not until halfway through the series that we find out about her backstory, along with Rem. We find out that both of them are twins that were born to a demon clan. Unlike her sister Ram, Rem is not a prodigy. She's always seen as second best, and it's not helpful that she's always comparing herself to her. We find out that their entire clan gets wiped out Uchiha style, the ones responsible being the witch's cult. It's actually funny if we look at Rem at the end of the series, then look back at what she originally thought of Subaru. She totally despised and mistrusted Subaru so much, she ended up killing him twice. Eventually, Rem does come around. She fully trusts Subaru, and even completely falls for him. This happens a little bit after that showdown with the demon dogs. Rem even outright admits her love for him in a different life. Ultimately, I just feel that Rem is more fleshed out of all the girls in the series. Like a lot of people, I ended up completely falling for poor Rem too. Subaru and her end up going through a lot more together in the end. This is actually what gives me mixed feelings about the end of the series. Emilia is the first girl that Subaru runs into, so unfortunately Rem has almost no chance. We do know that he really cares for her, of course only second to Emilia. If Subaru really doesn't want Rem, I'm sure a lot of us would step up for the job. Who knows? I heard that the author actually wrote a scenario of what would happen if Rem had ran away with Subaru at that time. Maybe one day they'll make that into an OVA. Our second twin, Ram. It's funny how Ram was actually the first one to fully trust Subaru, maybe even taking a liking to him. We find out about Ram that she's the most gifted out of the two demon twins. In comparison to Rem, she heavily excels in her mastery of magic. She even has that special clairvoyant ability. Unfortunately, she did lose her horn due to that encounter with the witch cult a long time ago. There's also something about her having a very special relationship with Roswell. Not sure what that's about. I was wondering at the beginning whether I would get confused with the two twins. Ram ended up showing up a lot less, so it turned out that it wasn't an issue. Now for a very special someone. It's the Green Witch cult leader, Beetlejuice. I'm not even sure that's how you pronounce it, but that's what I'm saying. When I start thinking about this guy, I'm almost speechless. What the frack was he? This guy's a special kind of something. Beetlejuice did have two favorite things going on. The first was doing the bridge, that bridge movement. Seriously, what the fuck? I'm guessing that this has something to do with the witch's ability. It must give your body amazing abilities. Beetlejuice also had this love of biting his fingers off. Again, what the hell? Maybe it was just his fingernails, but it's not exactly like that makes it any better. Anyway, this guy was one of the leaders of the witch's cult. I'm guessing that somehow that devotion to the witch gave him the power of those invisible hands. It reminded me of the ones from Elfenlied. Maybe Beetlejuice is just part Diclonius. Beetlejuice finally ends up dying when his spider form is taken out. I got a feeling that that's not the last time we're gonna see him. He kept on mentioning something about being the Archbishop of Sloth. If he is really gone, that means there's 6 others. I'm pretty sure that they only wiped out the witch's cult in this area too. There could be thousands of those mofos out there. Let me now touch on some of the supporting characters briefly. First off is Roswell L. Mathers. For the longest time, I just had him as that clown for the mansion in my notes. We meet him early on. He's supposed to be this top magic user, and currently he's supposed to be the lord of the Roswell mansion. There's honestly not much we know about him. He was initially very suspicious of Subaru. There's just way too many unknowns for this guy. Is he really a friend that's in support of Emilia? Or has he secretly been plotting against her in the background? Up next is the old butler dude, Wilhelm van Astraea. Like I mentioned in my finale review, this guy totally surprised me. I never expected this guy to be a master swordsman. He really turned out to be an MVP of the whole series. Seriously, he was a total badass during the White Whale battle. How did he not freaking die? I guess they're keeping him alive for some reason. Unfortunately for Subaru, he didn't find out exactly who this guy was until later on. If he did know, he could have just done what I said earlier, just keep on resetting, training with this guy until he becomes a master too. Next up, the little blonde girl Betty. We first get introduced to her as this guardian of the mansion's library. She's also not supposedly human. Maybe she's a demon of some sorts. We know that she has a high mastery in magic. She might even be able to rival Roswell. Betty also doesn't seem to care or really just have any interest in humans too. We get to see this to an extreme after Subaru accidentally kills Emilia. I did enjoy what we got of Betty's character. Hopefully she makes a return in a future season. Next up, Felt and her friend, the old dude. These two are some of the other ones I really enjoyed at the very beginning. Too bad we didn't get too much more of them. I was surprised to see that Felt was revealed to be the 5th candidate. I just assumed that she was rotting in jail somewhere after robbing Emilia. When they mentioned that a fifth candidate person was missing, for a split second I had this wild guess that it would be Felt. Felt did help add more flavor to the colorful candidates that were already assembled. Unfortunately for her, I don't actually think she has a shot at the throne. One last character I think deserves a mention, Crush. I think that she might have been the most interesting candidate for the throne. She turned out to be a great negotiator, and I'm also really glad to see a ruler that's not all talk. Crush was right there in the front lines leading her troops. I do wonder how good she would actually do as a ruler. She seems more to me like a person who would be a great leader, but maybe not that interested in the boring politics. Supposedly, she does have that ability to notice if someone is lying or not. That should come in handy in the future. I do have to go ahead and give a mention to the music of Re:Zero. I simply loved a lot of the music throughout the series, especially the ending theme. I usually just find myself skipping the ending theme for a lot of animes. Not once did I skip it for Re:Zero. There's also both of the different openings, when they actually play them that is. The combination of the theme with the visuals helped out a ton. Lastly, let me also quickly mention the animation. I do have to admit that a lot of the animation wasn't anything too special. It did happen to include some scenes throughout the series that were simply gorgeous. Where it really counted, the animation was taken from an 8 to an 11. This really helped to elevate those scenes even further. So then, now my final closing thoughts on Re:Zero. Let me once again express just how much Re:Zero had me at the edge of my seat, at least for the first 18 episodes. The journey we went through with Subaru, meeting characters like Emilia and Rem along the way, made this whole adventure that much better. I now had a few days to think over exactly how they chose to end the first season. This is what I concluded. I do think the ending left us with way too many questions, but it did leave me wanting more. Ultimately, I don't find that as being a bad thing. I originally thought that this had given us almost a complete story, maybe giving us anywhere from 70 to 80% of it. When I first started watching this, I assumed the series would end similar to how Sword Art Online did, where the first season ends with a complete story. Additional seasons after the first could give us another story with the characters we do love, and just help explore the world a little bit more. Looking more into it though, it seems that we have a similar situation instead to Attack on Titan. The story we got in this first season is only roughly a third of it. This just goes along with the theme of the mountain of questions that we still have at the end. There's simply so much potential for a future season, or seasons. I realized that a lot of how I ended up feeling about Re:Zero is largely influenced about the thought that we would later get answers to these questions in a later season. Otherwise, like I said, Re:Zero would be too much of an incomplete story. Unfortunately at this point, that's 2 to 3 years away. Although, I am confident we'll get a second season eventually. As for the story we did get in the first 25 episodes, it was simply a wonderful adventure. Re:Zero might be the best anime that's come out this year. It turned out to be one of those special gems that we're lucky to get every few years. As for how I would rate or judge Re:Zero, I think you guys already got a pretty good idea. Similar to what I mentioned in my review of Food Wars, I always like to consider if I'd rewatch a series, and also how soon I would do so if the answer is yes. In the case of Re:Zero, I hadn't even finished watching the complete season, and I already started rewatching it. I just got done watching it this past Sunday when the final episode went live. Right now, I'm already planning to rewatch it a second time as soon as possible. That works out perfect too. I have another video idea for Re:Zero. Now, you made it this far, so you gotta let me know what you thought of Re:Zero. Do you think Re:Zero is the best anime of this year? Are you also waiting for that season 2 announcement? Let's also not forget the most important question. Who is the best girl, Emilia or Rem? As a reminder, please be sure not to include spoilers for people who only watch the anime. If you enjoyed this very in-depth review of Re:Zero, please be sure to give the video a like. It'll also help me know whether you guys want to see more reviews like this one. If you made it this far in my longest video ever, you might as well subscribe. There's a lot more anime content coming, including reviews and some other anime goodness. So be sure to subscribe and I'll see you guys later.